Crossroads Cafe. The Crossroads Cafe was tucked away at the edge of town, a place where time seemed to slow down, and the world outside faded into a distant hum. It was a refuge for travelers, both those on the road and those navigating the more winding paths of their own lives. And it was here that two people, seemingly from different worlds, found themselves at a crossroads. Jack Lambert had always been a creature of habit. At 52, his life had settled into a quiet rhythm. Work, home, and the occasional outing to the Crossroads Cafe, where he sipped his coffee and watched the world go by. He was an unassuming man, comfortable in his solitude, content with his life as it was. He wasn't searching for anything. At least, that's what he told himself. But when Claire entered the cafe on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Jack felt something stir inside him. She was young, no more than 30, with an air of confidence that seemed out of place in a small town like this. She was the kind of woman who made heads turn, with her long auburn hair, sharp green eyes, and a smile that could light up a room. Jack had noticed her before, but she had never paid him any attention. That day, however, she sat down at the booth across from him, almost as if it was by design. "Mind if I sit here?" she asked, her voice warm but with an underlying edge of curiosity. Jack blinked, taken aback. He had never been one for confrontation, and yet there was something in her gaze that made it impossible to say no. "Sure," he said, his voice almost a whisper. Claire sat down, glancing around before her eyes settled on him. She studied him for a moment, then smiled again. "I'm Claire," she said, her tone playful yet knowing. "I just moved to town. Figured I'd get to know the locals." Jack nodded. "Jack, been here for a while," he said, leaning back in his seat. For a moment, the silence stretched between them. Jack couldn't help but feel the weight of her presence. It was as if she was a puzzle he couldn't quite figure out, and the more he tried, the more intrigued he became. "You look like someone who has a story," Claire said, leaning forward slightly, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Jack chuckled. "I've got a few, but most of them are pretty boring." "I'm sure that's not true. Come on, tell me one." Jack hesitated, unsure how to respond. But something about Claire made him want to open up, to let her in. Would you like me to continue the SSML for the rest of the story?" He began with a story about his younger years, about the mistakes he'd made, and the choices that had led him to where he was now. As he spoke, he found himself telling her more than he usually would, about his failed marriage, his struggles with loneliness, and the regret that sometimes weighed heavily on him. Claire listened intently, her eyes never leaving his face. When he finished, she sat back and smiled softly. "You're not as boring as you think," she said. "In fact, I think you're a lot more interesting than you give yourself credit for." Jack couldn't help but laugh, though there was a hint of discomfort in his voice. "I think you're just being polite." "I'm not," she said, her tone serious now. "Everyone has a story. It's just a matter of whether they're willing to share it." For a moment, Jack was silent, unsure what to say. He was used to being the quiet observer, not the one on the receiving end of such attention. But there was something about Claire that made him want to open up, to let her see the parts of him that he usually kept hidden. As the weeks passed, Jack found himself returning to the Crossroads Cafe more often. It had become his ritual, his place of refuge. But now there was something else. A pull, a sense of anticipation that he hadn't felt in years. It was Claire. She came in most days, usually in the afternoon when the cafe was quieter. At first, they exchanged pleasantries, then brief conversations. But gradually, their interactions deepened. She began to ask him about his life, about his hopes, his dreams, his regrets. And as they spoke, Jack found himself drawn to her in a way he couldn't quite explain. It was more than just physical attraction, it was something else entirely. She seemed to understand him in a way that no one ever had before. And yet, there was a tension between them. Jack was a man in his 50s, set in his ways, while Claire was 20 years younger, with a world of possibility ahead of her. She had dreams, ambitions, and a fire in her that Jack admired, even if it made him uneasy. One evening, as the rain pelted the windows, Claire leaned across the table, her voice low and inviting. "Jack, do you ever wonder what it would be like to start over?" she asked, her eyes fixed on his. Jack stared at her, taken aback. "Start over? I don't know if that's something you can do at my age." "Why not?" she replied, a playful smirk on her lips. "You have the power to change your story. You just have to want to." Jack's heart skipped a beat. He wanted to. He wanted to be more than the man he'd become. But at the same time, the age gap between them felt like an insurmountable obstacle. But Claire wasn't finished yet. "I'm not saying you should make some grand gesture or anything, but maybe there's something you need to let go of, something holding you back." The days turned into weeks. The dynamic between Jack and Claire shifted. There were moments of tension, moments where Jack found himself questioning his feelings for her. She would provoke him, teasing him with comments that pushed the boundaries of their relationship. One evening, as they sat at their usual booth, Claire leaned forward again, her voice soft but filled with a challenge. "Why don't you take a risk, Jack?" she said, her eyes searching his. "Why don't you stop playing it safe for once?" Jack felt a pang of frustration. He had spent his entire life playing it safe, and yet here was this woman, younger, bolder, challenging him to step out of his comfort zone. "I'm not sure I can," he admitted, his voice tinged with regret. Claire's eyes softened. "I think you can. But you have to decide that you're willing to take the leap. And maybe, just maybe, I can help you with that." Her words hung in the air between them, charged with an unspoken promise. The tension between Jack and Claire reached its peak one night, when a misunderstanding tore them apart. Jack had been struggling with the idea of taking risks, of stepping into unknown territory. And Claire, ever the provocateur, had pushed him to confront his fears. But it had gone too far. Jack had misread one of Claire's comments, and in his frustration, he lashed out. "I don't need you to tell me how to live my life," Jack had snapped. "You think you know everything, but you don't." Claire had stood there, her eyes wide with shock, before turning and walking out of the cafe. Jack watched her go, the weight of his words crashing down on him. It was the first time he had seen her truly angry, and it scared him. He realized then just how much she meant to him, and how afraid he was of losing her. The Crossroads Cafe had never felt so empty. Jack came every day, alone, ordering the same black coffee that now tasted like silence. He stared out the rain-speckled window, waiting, listening for the soft click of the door that never came. Claire was gone. After their argument, something inside him had unraveled. He replayed their last conversation in his head until the words blurred together. His bitterness, her disappointment, the way she had looked at him like he was just another man who didn't understand. He hated that she was right. Then, one Friday evening, as twilight painted gold across the cafe walls, the door opened. She was there. Claire stepped in slowly, as if unsure if she still belonged. Her usual confidence had dimmed, but there was a quiet strength in her eyes. She wore her hair pulled back, exposing the fragile line of her neck and the small scar at her temple that Jack had never noticed before. She didn't sit down right away. Instead, she stood across from him, watching. "I thought I should explain," she said. Jack nodded, his heart in his throat. She sat slowly. "I wasn't angry at what you said," she began. "I've heard worse. A lot worse." Her eyes drifted away from his, and suddenly Jack saw her differently. Not the vibrant woman who seemed untouchable, but someone carrying something unseen. "When I was 22, she said, voice calm but quiet, "I was in a relationship with someone dangerous, controlling, manipulative. He made me feel small, powerless, and when I left, he didn't let me go quietly." Jack said nothing, the weight of her words sinking into him, like rain on dry soil. "I spent a year hiding," she continued, "physically, emotionally. After that, I promised myself I'd never let anyone cage me again. That I'd live fully, even if it scared people, especially if it scared them." She looked at him now, and Jack saw the fierce edge he had admired in her. But beneath it, something softer. "That's why I push you, Jack. Not because I want to provoke you, but because I want you to feel what I fought so hard to recover, freedom." He reached across the table, his hand trembling. She let him take hers. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Not of you, of what you made me feel, of how much I wanted something again." Claire's fingers tightened around his. "We're all afraid. The question is, do we let that fear define us, or do we walk through it?" "I want to walk through it," Jack said, his voice breaking. "With you." A year later, the Crossroads Cafe had changed. Or maybe Jack had. The same booths still lined the walls, the same soft jazz played over the speakers, and the same rain sometimes tapped at the windows. But now there was laughter, shared stories, a new warmth. Claire sat across from him, their hands always finding each other in quiet moments. She had taken a job teaching creative writing at the local college, and Jack had started his own small firm, consulting on business strategy for local startups. He had finally left the firm that had bound him for too long, and he never looked back. They traveled sometimes, short road trips, to nowhere in particular. They argued sometimes too, but the kind of arguments that ended with a smile or a kiss. Most importantly, Jack had stopped living in the past. He no longer clung to regrets or replayed old mistakes like a worn-out reel. Claire had taught him how to live again, by simply showing him that he could. One rainy morning, as they sat sipping coffee at their usual booth, Claire looked at him with a sly smile. You know what I love about this place? She asked. Jack raised an eyebrow. What's that? It's called the Crossroads Cafe, she said, tracing a finger along the rim of her mug. It's where people decide which way they want their life to go. Where you either turn back or move forward. Jack smiled, feeling the truth in her words settle deep within him. I think I took the right turn, he said softly. Claire leaned in, her eyes gleaming. So did I. And outside the window, the rain fell gently, washing the city clean. Inside, Jack and Claire sat together, at the quiet little cafe where everything had begun. Two people who had once been lost, now found, not in each other, but in the space they had created together. At the crossroads, before it offers us decisions, it hands us complexity, ambiguity, pain, joy, and love, all without a manual. Jack had spent most of his life at intersections he was too afraid to cross. Claire had sprinted across hers, hoping speed would save her from falling. But in the quiet middle of a rainy cafe, they learned something profound. That love doesn't always arrive when we're ready. It arrives when we need it. And when it does, it asks only one thing. Will you step forward, even if your hands still shake?